The first snowfall of February had come late that year, dusting the city streets in a thin layer of white. The street lamps flickered, casting pools of golden light onto the frozen pavement. Inside Willow's Cafe, nestled on the corner of a quiet avenue, the scent of fresh coffee and vanilla lingered in the air. Couples huddled close in booths, their hands intertwined over steaming mugs, whispering promises of love. It was the season of roses, chocolates, and candlelit dinners, but for some, February brought something far more sinister. Emma Carter sat alone near the window, watching the snow settle against the glass. The soft glow of her phone illuminated her face as she scrolled absent-mindedly through a dating app. She wasn't looking for love, at least, not in the fairy tale sense. After a series of disappointing relationships, she had convinced herself that Valentine's Day was just another day. But still, something about this time of year made her feel lonelier than usual. A notification popped up. "You have a new match." The name on the screen read Daniel Holloway. His profile picture showed a handsome man with dark eyes and a charming smile. His message was simple. "Hi Emma, you have the most captivating eyes." A warmth spread through her chest. Flattery, even from a stranger, had its effect. She typed back, her fingers hesitating only for a moment before pressing send. Outside across the street, a lone figure stood watching the cafe. Snowflakes clung to the hood of his coat, his breath curling into the cold night air. In his pocket, he thumbed the edge of a faded newspaper clipping. The headline was barely legible beneath the years of wear, but the name in bold print was unmistakable. Emma Carter. The next morning, Emma Carter awoke to a dim, overcast sky filtering through her apartment window. The warmth of her bed was inviting, but her phone buzzing on the nightstand drew her attention. "Daniel Holloway, good morning, beautiful, sleep well?" A small smile tugged at her lips. She hesitated before replying, unsure why she was giving this stranger more thought than usual. Maybe it was the way he spoke. His words felt personal, intimate, like they were meant just for her. Emma was no stranger to online dating. She had spent months swiping through profiles, going on a few mediocre dates, and deleting the app only to reinstall it weeks later. But Daniel felt different. His messages were thoughtful, his humor sharp, and his voice, when they finally exchanged numbers, was deep and velvety, like a late-night radio host's. By the time February 10th arrived, they had spent nearly a week talking. Long conversations stretched into the night, covering everything from childhood memories to favorite horror movies. And yet, something about him remained elusive. He dodged personal questions, where exactly he lived, what he did for a living, and his responses always veered back to her. "I want to know everything about you," he had whispered over the phone one night. Every little detail. Her friends were divided. Megan, her closest confidante, was skeptical. "A guy that perfect, either he's married or he's hiding something." Ben, her coworker and reluctant dating coach, thought she was being too cautious. "You finally find a guy who doesn't just want to send creepy DMs and you're questioning it, just meet him already." Emma wanted to. But something in the back of her mind gnawed at her, a cold, creeping unease she couldn't quite shake. On the evening of February 12th, a package arrived at her doorstep. Inside was a single red rose, wrapped in delicate silver ribbon. No note, no sender. Her heartbeat quickened as she stared at it. A romantic gesture? Maybe. But she hadn't told Daniel her address. Her phone vibrated. "Daniel Holloway, did you like your gift?" A chill ran through her. She never told him where she lived. Emma's fingers hovered over her phone screen, her pulse quickening. How did he know where she lived? The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. She wanted to ask him, to demand an explanation, but part of her feared the answer. Instead, she typed carefully. Emma, it's beautiful, but how did you know where to send it? A few moments passed before the typing indicator appeared. Daniel, a little detective work. I hope that's okay? Detective work. The words sat uneasily in her chest. She forced a smile, even though no one could see her, and replied with a simple thanks. Then, she placed the rose on her kitchen counter and stepped back as if it might bite. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, unease settled over her like a heavy blanket. She double-checked that her front door was locked, then triple-checked. The shadows in her room seemed deeper than usual, and every sound from outside made her flinch. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. Daniel, are you asleep? Emma hesitated before replying. Emma, trying to you. No answer. A minute later, her phone vibrated again. But this time, it wasn't a message. It was a picture. Her breath caught in her throat. The image was dark and grainy, but it was unmistakable. It was her apartment building, taken from the street below. Her hands trembled as she typed. Emma, Daniel, where are you? No response. She sat frozen in bed, staring at the screen, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Minutes passed. Then, just as she was about to call Megan, another message appeared. Daniel, you look beautiful when you sleep. Her breath hitched. Her curtains were drawn. There was no way he could see inside. Unless... She turned her head slowly toward the window. The darkness outside was vast, swallowing the city beyond. But in the farthest corner of the parking lot, where the streetlight barely reached, she could make out the shape of a man standing completely still, watching. Emma's blood turned to ice. Emma's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. Her fingers hovered over her phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but a paralyzing fear held her in place. The figure in the parking lot didn't move. He stood there, just outside the glow of the street lamp, a dark silhouette against the snow. Then, slowly, he lifted his phone. Emma's phone buzzed. A new message. Daniel, I see you. A scream built in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Think, Emma. Think. She couldn't stay here. She had to get out. She bolted from her bed, grabbing the nearest heavy object, her bedside lamp. If he tried to break in, she wouldn't go down without a fight. But then, her phone vibrated again. Daniel, don't run. Her stomach clenched. Was he inside? She forced herself to move, inching toward the door. Her hand was on the knob when... A soft knock. She choked back a gasp. The knock was too quiet, too deliberate. Whoever was on the other side didn't want to alert neighbors. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. Then, the doorknob turned. A strangled noise escaped her lips as she stumbled back, her lamp raised, ready to swing. But the lock held. He couldn't get in. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel, you forgot the back door. Her stomach dropped. She whirled around just as a gust of cold air swept through the apartment. The back door, she had locked it. She was sure she had locked it. But the wind now whispered through the opening, carrying the scent of roses. And then, footsteps. Emma spun, raising the lamp, but it was too late. A hand clamped over her mouth. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was a single red rose resting on the floor. Emma's consciousness flickered like a faulty light bulb, fading in and out. The air around her was thick with the scent of roses, sweet, almost sickly. Her head throbbed. When she tried to move, a sharp pain pulsed through her wrists. Tied. Panic clawed at her throat. She forced her eyes open. She was sitting in a dimly lit room, her arms bound to the back of a wooden chair. Candles flickered on every surface, casting distorted shadows across the walls. Scattered between them were deep red roses, their petals dark and curling. The floor was covered in them, as though she had been placed inside a lover's shrine or a tomb. Then she saw him. Daniel Holloway stood across from her, his dark eyes gleaming in the candlelight. But the warmth she once imagined in them was gone. This was not the charming man from their late-night conversations. His expression was unreadable, detached, almost clinical, as he studied her. "You weren't supposed to be scared of me, Emma," he murmured. She swallowed hard, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Stay calm. Don't give him what he wants." "Then why did you break into my home?" she managed, her voice hoarse. A slow, measured sigh escaped his lips. He crouched in front of her, close enough for her to see the faint scars on his knuckles. "Because I love you." Emma stiffened. "You don't know me," she whispered. Daniel tilted his head, as if confused by the statement. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He smoothed it out on the table beside her. Emma's stomach lurched. It was a photograph of her, taken years ago at a college Valentine's Day party. She barely remembered it, laughing, holding a red drink in her hand, standing beside her then boyfriend Jason. Daniel followed her gaze. His lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. "You were supposed to love me first," he murmured. "But you chose him." Emma's breath hitched. Memories crashed over her in waves. Jason. She hadn't spoken to him in years. He had left town after graduation. But before that, her mind raced. He had a roommate. Quiet, awkward, always lingering at the edges of parties, never speaking much. Daniel. It wasn't a coincidence. It was never a coincidence. He had been waiting, watching. Her vision blurred with tears. He never stopped watching. Emma's voice trembled as she whispered, "Please let me go." Daniel leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I've waited too long for you, Emma." His fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "This Valentine's Day, you're finally mine." The candlelight flickered, and the room was swallowed by darkness.